You know that feeling? Like a piece of your past has its hooks in you, and it's just playing on a loop you can't seem to stop? It's something a lot of us can relate to, but man, it's hard to really understand what's going on under the hood. So today, let's dive into exactly that. Why do some experiences just refuse to let go?
Wow. I mean, this quote from Jessica Stern just nails it, doesn't it? Trauma isn't some neat chapter in your life story. It's an interruption. It's this sudden, jarring thing that just rips the whole plot apart. And then you're left just trying to figure out how to keep going when the story you thought you were living just doesn't make any sense anymore. So yeah, that really brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Why? Why do some of us get stuck like that? Reliving the same moments, the same feelings over and over and over. It kind of feels like a mystery, right? Well, we're going to solve it. And the key is to look at two very different but surprisingly similar loops that are running in our brains.
All right. Our first big clue comes from the story of a man who was, quite literally, trapped. He couldn't escape the battlefield, even though the war had been over for years. So let's meet Tom. When Dr. Bessel van der Kolk first met him, it had been a full decade since he'd served in Vietnam. And on the outside, everything looked perfect. Successful lawyer, beautiful family, the whole 9 yards. But on the inside, he felt completely dead, totally hollowed out. He was just going through the motions, basically faking it, desperately hoping that one day he might wake up and feel like his old self again.
And what's so striking about his story is just how total it was. This wasn't just, having a few bad memories. It was a complete rewiring of his entire life. Think about it. Horrible nightmares made sleep a thing to be feared. Everyday sounds, like fireworks, would trigger these terrifying flashbacks. One minute, he'd have this explosive rage, and the next, he'd be totally numb, unable to feel anything for his own family. That phrase he used, living behind a glass wall, is just perfect. He could see life happening, but he was completely cut off from it.
Okay, so Tom's story really gives us a gut-level sense of what being stuck feels like. But now for our second clue, we're going to zoom in and look at what's actually happening on a biological level. How an experience can literally, physically rewire your brain. Okay, this is really the core idea here. Trauma is not just a story we tell ourselves about something bad that happened. According to The Body Keeps the Score, it's a physical imprint. It's a real biological change that basically reorganizes your entire system around one single goal: survival. Your brain, your body, the whole system gets stuck in the on position, constantly braced for a threat that, well, it isn't even there anymore.
And this just shows you exactly what that reorganization looks like in the real world. I mean, think about it. For most of us, a guy walking down the street, he's just a guy. But for someone who's been through trauma, he could be a potential threat. A baby's cry, for a medic like one from the book, that sound became a trigger for these horrible images of dying kids. And a firework. For Tom, that wasn't a party. That was the sound and terror of an ambush. Your entire world looks, sounds, and feels completely different.
So what's going on here? Well, it's because the brain's alarm system, the part that's supposed to keep you safe, it gets recalibrated. It's like the smoke detector in your house suddenly going off every time you make toast. The sensitivity is cranked way, way up, and it starts seeing danger everywhere. Your body is just flooded with stress hormones, keeping you in this permanent state of fight, flight, or freeze. You are, for all intents and purposes, physically living in the past.
Okay, so we've established the brain has this incredibly powerful primitive alarm system. Now, get this. What if I told you that the very same ancient system is being triggered thousands of times a day, not by life or death threats, but by that little device in your pocket? This brings us to our next major clue, the modern dopamine loop.
Yeah, you heard that right. It turns out that the same primitive part of our brain, the part that runs those powerful survival loops, is getting pinged constantly in our modern lives. Not by danger, but by our phones. And the key chemical driving all this is dopamine. Now, a lot of us think of dopamine as the pleasure chemical, right? But that's not quite the whole story. It's actually more of a seeking chemical. It's the chemical of desire. It doesn't really fire when we get the reward. It fires like crazy when we anticipate getting a reward. It's the engine that drives us to want, to seek, and to search for what's next. Let's break down how this creates a really powerful loop with something super simple: texting. Okay, so first, you seek. You send the text. Then comes the magic part, anticipate. This is where the dopamine goes nuts. Why? Because it's unpredictable. You don't know when or even if you'll get a response. That uncertainty is like fuel for your brain's seeking system. It's the thrill of the hunt.
And finally, step 3, the reward. Sss. The notification pops up, you get the reply, and boom, the loop is complete. And you're immediately ready to do it all over again.
So just how often are we running this little loop? Well, brace yourself because this number is just wild. Research shows that the average person touches their phone, get this, 2,617 times a day. That is absolutely staggering. Every single one of those touches is another little spin of that dopamine meal.
Okay, so now we have our two big clues on the table, the brain's ancient trauma loop and this super powerful modern dopamine loop. Now let's put them side by side and finally see why we, as humans, are so incredibly prone to getting stuck.
This right here, this is the key to the whole thing. Just look at the parallels. They're both what we call feedback loops, basically a cycle that just keeps feeding itself, getting stronger and stronger. The trauma loop is constantly seeking threat. It's fueled by fear, and the reward, if you can call it that, is survival. The dopamine loop, it's seeking information, fueled by unpredictability, and the reward is a little reply or notification. Do you see it? It's the exact same underlying brain machinery, just running a different program.
So there it is. That's the answer to our mystery. That's why we get stuck. Being trapped in trauma is like being caught in this incredibly powerful negative feedback loop where your brain's seeking system has been completely hijacked. It's not looking for a text reply or a social media like. It's constantly, automatically, and unconsciously seeking any and all evidence of threat. It's a survival mechanism that's basically forgotten where the off switch is.
And that brings this whole thing right back to you and to me, to all of us. Because whether it's the quiet echo of something from our past or the loud, constant pull of a screen, we all have these loops running in the background of our lives. And just understanding that they're there, well, that's the first, most crucial step to deciding if you want to stay on that ride. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What loops are running your life?